My name is Ava Miller, and I'm 29 years old. For 5 years, my entire world revolved around being a marketing manager at the Sterling Vance Collective. I poured my soul into that company, clawing my way toward a promotion that was finally within my grasp. My family used to be my everything, right up until the moment I discovered the most sickening betrayal imaginable. My own parents called my boss and told him I was mentally unstable, all so my sister Chloe could swoop in and take the position I had earned. When I finally confronted my father, he just laughed in my face and said, "Honey, it's just a job. If you have ever been stabbed in the back by the very people who were supposed to protect you, let me know where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe to see how I turned this absolute nightmare completely on its head." I graduated from NYU with a double major in marketing and business administration. And let me tell you, college was no walk in the park for me. Unlike so many of my classmates who had their parents footing the entire bill, I had to juggle 2 part-time jobs just to stay afloat, all while keeping up a 3.9 GPA. My parents could have helped out more financially, but they always had this mantra that I needed to build character through hard work. Funny, because that same logic never seemed to apply to my younger sister, Chloe. They helped her with almost everything, always claiming she was just more sensitive and needed that extra layer of support. Despite all those hurdles, I thrived academically. It paid off when I landed a coveted internship at the Sterling Vance Collective the summer before my senior year. That internship led directly to a job offer, and I started as a junior marketing associate a single week after I threw my graduation cap in the air. Sterling Vance wasn't just some random agency. It was one of the top marketing firms in New York, handling clients that ranged from local startups to global Fortune 500 corporations. Just getting my foot in the door felt like a monumental achievement. The work environment was as intense and competitive as you can imagine. The whole place ran on a merit-based system, which meant your performance was the only thing that determined how far you could go. Over the 5 years I was there, I didn't just meet expectations, I shattered them. I personally brought in 4 major new clients. I led campaigns that were so successful they boosted company revenue by 20%. I even took the time to mentor junior team members, helping them find their footing. My performance reviews were consistently glowing. My direct supervisor, Leo Vance, one of the firm's partners, often praised my exceptional work ethic and what he called my innovative thinking. Every Sunday, I'd make the trip to my parents' home in the suburbs for dinner. My accomplishments would get a brief nod, but they were never really celebrated. My father, Robert, a successful financial advisor, would give me a quick, approving "atta-girl" before immediately pivoting the conversation to Chloe and whatever her latest struggle was. My mother, Helen, was more subtle with her favoritism. She was always finding ways to coddle Chloe while just expecting me to handle any challenge that came my way, no matter how big. Chloe was 25 and had already cycled through 3 different jobs in the last 2 years. She had the exact same educational opportunities I did, but she chose a less demanding college and graduated with a GPA that was, to put it mildly, unimpressive. Her work ethic was questionable at best. She was notorious for calling in sick whenever she just didn't feel like going to work. Every job she had ended the same way. Either she'd quit because it was too stressful, or she'd be let go for poor performance. At the moment, she was unemployed and living back at home with our parents, who were constantly making excuses for her. "Not everyone is built for the corporate world like you are, Ava," my mother would say, as if my success was some random genetic trait and not the direct result of endless dedication and sleepless nights. Despite this obvious favoritism, I tried to keep a decent relationship with my family. They were still my parents, and Chloe was still my sister. I believed, naively, that we had a fundamental level of respect and support for one another, even if the scales weren't perfectly balanced. That all changed on a Tuesday morning in March when Leo called me into his office. He closed the door, which was rare, and gestured for me to sit. "Ava, I wanted to chat with you privately before any official announcements are made," he started, his usual confident tone tinged with genuine excitement. "Sharon is retiring as Vice President of Strategy at the end of the quarter, and the executive team has been discussing her replacement." My heart started hammering against my ribs. I knew exactly where this was going. "Your name is at the very top of our list," he went on. "Your performance has been nothing short of exceptional, and frankly, you're already handling many of the responsibilities that come with the role. We still have to go through the formal process, of course, interview a few external candidates as per company policy, but I wanted you to know you are our preferred choice." The VP of Strategy position was a life-changing step up. It came with a corner office, a 70% salary increase, a team of 10 direct reports, and a seat at the executive table. This was the exact opportunity I had been sacrificing and working tirelessly for over the last 5 years. That night, I could barely keep my excitement in check as I drove to my parents' house for an impromptu dinner. I even brought a nice bottle of champagne, ready to finally have a real celebration with my family. When I got there, Chloe was already on the couch, whining about another failed job interview. "They asked for 5 years of experience," she grumbled. "How is anyone supposed to get experience if no one will hire you without it?" When I finally shared my news about the potential promotion, the reaction was completely underwhelming. My father gave a short, "That's great, honey," before turning right back to consoling Chloe. My mother asked a couple of questions about the position, but she seemed more worried about whether the extra responsibilities would be too much pressure for me. Chloe's reaction was the most telling. She plastered on a fake smile that didn't come close to reaching her eyes, and immediately changed the subject back to her own job search. As the night went on, I caught my parents and Chloe having a hushed, intense conversation in the kitchen. The second I walked toward them, they clammed up and scattered to different corners of the house. I left that night feeling completely deflated. What should have been a moment of shared joy had somehow become just another evening orbiting the black hole of Chloe's problems. I had no idea that this was only the first chapter of a betrayal that would detonate the very foundations of my professional life and my family. The first signs that something was seriously wrong started to appear about a week after I told my family about the promotion. Rachel from accounting, who usually gave me a big warm hello in the morning, barely made eye contact as we passed in the hall. Later that day, during our weekly team meeting, I noticed a couple of my team members exchanging weird glances while I was speaking. It was subtle, but for someone like me who prided herself on building strong workplace relationships, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. By Thursday, things got more alarming. A major strategy meeting for our biggest client, a meeting I was supposed to be leading, was rescheduled without anyone telling me. When I asked Leo about it, he was vague, muttering something about restructuring the approach before quickly changing the subject. Then, I was left off the invite list for an executive lunch where I knew preliminary talks about the department's reorganization were happening, a reorganization I was supposed to be heading soon. My friend and coworker, Jenna, pulled me aside after that lunch. "Ava, is everything okay with you?" she asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Everything's fine," I said, completely baffled by her question. Jenna hesitated for a second before continuing. Look, there are some rumors going around. People are saying you might be going through some personal issues like mental health stuff. I was floored, just completely stunned. What? That is absolutely not true. Where on earth would anyone get an idea like that? I don't know, she said, shaking her head. But Leo has been in and out of closed-door meetings with HR all week, and your name keeps coming up. That afternoon, I made an excuse to walk past the HR department. Just as I did, I saw Leo in the office of Susan, the HR director. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear bits and pieces of their conversation. The email was quite detailed, Susan was saying. If what her father says is true, we have to seriously consider if she's ready for this level of responsibility. She's never shown any signs of instability here, Leo's voice responded. Her work has been exemplary. Family often sees things we don't, Susan countered, and the liability is a serious concern if we just ignore this kind of warning. I hurried away, my mind spinning. My father had contacted my workplace? About what? What could he have possibly said that would make them question my mental stability? Over the next couple of days, the isolation at work became suffocating. Projects I had been leading were quietly reassigned. Conversations would screech to a halt the moment I entered a room. Even Leo, who had been my biggest champion for years, became distant and evasive. By Friday afternoon, I couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. I decided to confront him directly. I knocked on his office door late in the day, after most of the staff had already left for the weekend. Leo, I need to know what's going on, I said firmly, closing the door behind me. There has been a very clear shift in how people are treating me, and I know it has something to do with these rumors about my mental health. Leo looked deeply uncomfortable, shuffling papers on his desk. Ava, sometimes personnel matters are complex. We have to consider a lot of factors when making decisions about leadership positions. Is this about what my father told you? I asked, cutting straight to the point. His head snapped up, his surprise obvious. You know about that? I know he contacted you, I said. What I don't know is what he said. Leo let out a long, heavy sigh. Your father reached out to express concerns about promoting you to a high-stress position. He mentioned that you've had some significant episodes in the past, that you might not handle pressure well. He was very specific about certain incidents. My mind was just a blur of confusion. Incidents? What incidents? There were no incidents. He mentioned a nervous breakdown during your junior year of college, ongoing anxiety issues that you've been hiding from work, and a tendency toward emotional instability during family conflicts. He said your sister has been covering for you in family situations for years and was worried the same might happen at work. I was speechless. None of it was true, not a single word. My junior year had been stressful, sure, but completely manageable. I had never had any mental health issues beyond the normal stress anyone in a demanding job would feel. Leo, none of that is true. I have never had a breakdown or any kind of mental health issue that would affect my work. My performance here speaks for itself. He looked genuinely conflicted. Ava, I value your work tremendously, but when a family member reaches out with these kinds of concerns, we have a responsibility to take it seriously. I left his office in a complete daze, unable to wrap my head around the scale of my father's betrayal. But the worst, I would soon find out, was yet to come. The following Monday, I came in early, hoping to gather my thoughts before facing another day of whispers and sideways glances. The office was mostly empty. I noticed Leo had stepped away from his desk and left his computer unlocked, something he almost never did. Just then, a notification popped up on his screen. It was an email with the subject line, Concerns about Ava Miller. The sender was my father. I know I shouldn't have looked. It was a massive violation of privacy and company policy, but my entire career and reputation were being dismantled because of whatever lies my father had spun. I quickly clicked open the email, and what I read shattered my world into a million pieces. Dear Mr. Vance, the email began. To follow up on our phone conversation, I wanted to provide more specific examples of Ava's concerning behavior. As her father, this is extremely difficult to share, but I believe it would be irresponsible not to warn you before you make such a significant promotion decision. The email went on to detail a series of completely fabricated incidents, a supposed hospitalization for anxiety during college that never, ever happened. Claims that I had explosive episodes at family gatherings whenever things didn't go my way. Allegations that I had been secretly seeing a psychiatrist for years for emotional regulation issues. It even had the audacity to suggest that my driven work ethic was actually a manifestation of unhealthy obsessive tendencies. But the most devastating blow came at the very end. While we want to support Ava's career, my wife and I believe a high-pressure executive position would be detrimental to her mental health. We would suggest considering other candidates, including potentially her sister, Chloe, who has expressed interest in joining your company. Chloe has a similar educational background, but a much more stable temperament and a healthy approach to work-life balance. I have attached her resume for your consideration. The betrayal was absolute. My father hadn't just sabotaged my promotion with a web of lies. He was actively lobbying for Chloe to take my place. I quickly closed the email and stumbled back to my desk, my hands shaking so violently I could barely control them. I just made it to the restroom before the tears erupted. I locked myself in a stall, pressing my fist against my mouth to muffle the gut-wrenching sobs that tore through my body. The betrayal was so profound, so calculated, so cold. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, and instead, they had deliberately and systematically torpedoed my career to benefit my sister. I don't know how long I was in there before I heard Jenna's voice. Ava, are you in here? Are you okay? I tried to pull myself together, splashing cold water on my face before unlocking the stall door. One look at my red, swollen eyes told her everything she needed to know. What happened? She asked, gently guiding me to a small bench in the corner of the restroom. Through broken sentences and a fresh wave of tears, I told her everything. The email, the lies, the suggestion that Chloe should get the position I had bled for. That is insane, Jenna said, her face a mixture of shock and outrage. Everyone here knows how dedicated and level-headed you are. I've worked with you for 4 years, through dozens of high-pressure deadlines and impossible clients. Not once have I ever seen you show any sign of being unstable. It doesn't matter what's true, I said bitterly. The seed has been planted. Leo and HR will always have this doubt about me now. Then we need to fight this, Jenna insisted. I'll go with you to HR right now. I will testify to your character and performance. With Jenna's support, I composed myself enough to request an immediate meeting with Leo and Susan from HR. In the conference room, I laid out everything I had discovered. I know I shouldn't have read the email on Leo's computer, I acknowledged. That was wrong, and I'll accept whatever consequences come from that. But what my father told you is completely and utterly false. I have never been hospitalized. I have never seen a psychiatrist. Leo looked deeply troubled. Ava, we would never make a promotion decision based solely on an email from a family member. But your father was very convincing, and he's a respected professional himself. Has my performance ever given you any reason to question my stability or capability? I asked him directly. No, he admitted. Your work has been exceptional. Then why would you even entertain these claims without discussing them with me first? Susan interjected, her HR training showing in her carefully measured tone. When we receive information about an employee's well-being, especially from a family member, we have a duty to consider it. That said, we should have brought these concerns to you directly before taking any action. What action has already been taken? I asked, dreading the answer. Leo and Susan exchanged a look. We have interviewed several candidates for the VP of Strategy position, Leo said carefully, including your sister Chloe, who came in yesterday. The room felt like it was tilting. Yesterday? You interviewed my sister for my promotion yesterday based on my father's recommendation? We interview all qualified candidates, Susan said defensively. Her resume showed relevant education and some experience in marketing. She has been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years, I said, my voice rising despite my desperate efforts to stay calm. She has no significant marketing experience. The only reason she was interviewed is because my father is trying to hand her my position. The meeting ended with vague promises that they would review the situation and consider all factors. But I knew the truth. The damage was done. Even if they didn't promote Chloe, the doubt about me had been planted too deeply to ever be fully uprooted. That evening, I drove to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Both of their cars were in the driveway, and so was Chloe's. Perfect. I could confront them all at once. I didn't even bother to knock, using my old key to let myself into the house I grew up in. They were in the dining room, the remains of dinner still on the table, their laughter cut off the second I appeared in the doorway. Ava, my mother said, surprise in her voice. We weren't expecting you tonight. Clearly, I replied, my voice ice cold. You all seem to be celebrating something. My father's expression shifted from surprise to caution. Chloe had a promising job interview yesterday. We were just having a small family dinner. At Sterling and Vance, I said. It wasn't a question. The dead silence that followed confirmed everything. You contacted my boss, I continued, looking my father straight in the eye. You told him I was mentally unstable. You made up lies about hospitalizations and breakdowns that never happened. All so Chloe could take the promotion I worked 5 years for. Now, Ava, my father began, using that condescending tone he always adopted when he thought I was overreacting. The business world is complicated. Sometimes people need a little help getting opportunities. Help? You call destroying my professional reputation help? Don't be so dramatic, Chloe interjected. It's just a job. I whipped my head toward her, barely containing my fury. Just a job? I have worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years. I have brought in millions of dollars in revenue. I earned that promotion. And what has it gotten you? My father asked. You're always working. No boyfriend, few friends. You hardly have any time for family. Chloe needs this opportunity more than you do. She's a single mother trying to provide for your nephew. That was rich. Chloe's son spent more time with my parents than with her. They were practically raising him while Chloe was out with friends or dating a string of losers. So you decided to sabotage me, I said, my voice shaking, to lie about my mental health. Do you have any idea the damage you have done? My mother finally spoke, her voice soft but her words just as sharp. We were concerned about you, honey. You've always been so intense, so driven. It's not healthy. Concerned. If you were concerned, you would have talked to me, not gone behind my back to my employer with fabricated stories about my mental health. Chloe actually had the audacity to look slightly guilty. They probably wouldn't have hired me anyway. I was just exploring options. They were considering you for my position, I finally shouted, losing the last thread of my composure. A position you are completely unqualified for. My father stood up then, his patience gone. That's enough, Ava. You've always had a flair for the dramatic. This is exactly the kind of emotional reaction we were worried about. Emotional reaction? You sabotaged my career. You betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. He laughed. He actually laughed, as if my raw pain was amusing to him. Honey, it's just a job. There will be other opportunities. Chloe needs this more than you do right now. That laugh, that utter dismissal of everything I had worked for, broke something inside of me. I realized in that moment that my family had never truly supported me. My success had always been something that happened in spite of them, not because of them. The next day, I was called into another meeting with Leo and Susan. They suggested I take a voluntary leave of absence while they sorted through the situation. When I refused, they placed me on administrative leave, pending a professional evaluation. My access to all company systems was revoked, and I was escorted out of the building like a common criminal. Over the following weeks, the isolation was absolute. My parents had told our entire extended family that I was having some emotional issues and needed space. Friends who heard rumors about my leave reached out at first, but my shame and anger made it impossible to explain what had really happened. Even Jenna's support started to wane as she got buried under the weight of taking over my projects at work. I was utterly alone, betrayed by the people I should have been able to trust the most, and facing the potential ruin of the career I had poured my life into building. The first week after being placed on leave, I barely left my apartment. I kept the blinds drawn, dishes piled up in the sink, and I just cycled between fits of blinding rage and long periods of numb disbelief. How could my own parents do this to me? The question played on a relentless loop in my mind, never giving me an answer that made any sense. Sleep was a stranger. When exhaustion finally took over, I'd jolt awake from nightmares where I was screaming at my family while they just stood there, laughing and turning their backs on me. Food lost all its appeal. I subsisted mainly on cold delivery pizza and cereal I ate straight from the box. By the second week, I knew I needed help. This betrayal had cut way too deep for me to handle alone. I found Dr. Evelyn Reed, a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and I booked an emergency appointment. Her office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that seemed designed to put you at ease. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a direct, no-nonsense manner that I appreciated right away. "So, what brings you here today, Ava?" she asked after I'd filled out the initial paperwork. The whole story just poured out of me in a torrent of hurt and fury. Dr. Reed listened with incredible patience, occasionally asking a clarifying question, but mostly just letting me unload all the emotions I had been bottling up. "What your family did was a profound betrayal," she said when I was finally done. "Your reaction is not only normal, it's healthy. You are grieving the loss of the family you thought you had." Over the next few sessions, Dr. Reed helped me start to see patterns in my family's dynamics that I had either normalized or just completely overlooked. The constant favoritism toward Chloe wasn't just typical sibling rivalry. It was a systemic imbalance that had shaped our entire family structure for years. "Your parents seem to view Chloe as perpetually in need of rescue," Dr. Reed observed, "and they've cast you in the role of the self-sufficient one who doesn't need any support. This dynamic likely started in your childhood and has now just reached its logical and destructive extreme. She guided me through memories I had long suppressed or rationalized away. My parents missing my high school valedictorian speech because Chloe had a minor cold. Them using a chunk of my college fund to bail Chloe out of credit card debt, while telling me I should just apply for more scholarships. The constant pressure on me to include Chloe in my friend groups and activities, no matter how badly she behaved. I always thought that was just how families worked, I admitted during one session. The stronger sibling looks out for the weaker one. But that assumption created a no-win situation for you, Dr. Reed pointed out. The more successful you became, the more you were expected to sacrifice for Chloe. Your success became something to be redistributed rather than celebrated. As the therapy continued, my thoughts turned more and more toward revenge. I had these vivid fantasies about exposing my parents to our entire extended family, about finding a way to get Chloe fired from any job she managed to get, about making them feel the same gut-wrenching pain they had so casually inflicted on me. I want them to suffer, I confessed to Dr. Reed. I want them to lose something they value the way I lost my career and my reputation. Those feelings are perfectly natural, she assured me. But acting on them would likely just leave you feeling empty, and it could potentially damage your own integrity. The question to ask yourself is, what outcome would actually help you heal and move forward? That single question completely shifted my perspective. What did I really want? It wasn't just to hurt my family. It was to reclaim my career, my reputation, and my sense of self-worth. I wanted to prove them wrong, not just about my mental stability, but about my strength and my resilience. With this clearer vision, I started to form a strategic approach instead of an emotional one. I began by documenting everything: the original conversation with Leo about the promotion, the timeline of my father's interference, every single false claim he had made, and the evidence from my academic and work history that contradicted each lie. I researched my legal options for defamation and workplace discrimination. While I probably had a case, I knew the legal battle would be long, expensive, and emotionally exhausting. It would also permanently tarnish my professional reputation, even if I won. The business world is small, and being known as the person who sued her own family and her employer would make finding future opportunities nearly impossible. So instead, I decided to focus on rebuilding. I reached out to former professors who had mentored me, explained the situation honestly, and asked for their guidance. I started contacting former clients who had been thrilled with my work, reconnecting under the guise of professional networking. I was building a support system that was completely separate from my family and my immediate colleagues. Professor Davis, my old marketing ethics teacher, was particularly helpful. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe near campus, and she listened to my story with growing indignation. "This is unconscionable," she said firmly. "Both your family's actions and your company's response. They had a duty to investigate these claims properly before taking any action against you. I just don't know how to move forward," I admitted. "Even if I manage to keep my job, everyone there will always have these doubts about me." Professor Davis thought for a moment. "Perhaps keeping your current job shouldn't be the goal. You've built valuable skills and incredible relationships. Those are assets you can take anywhere." I'd been so hyper-focused on defending my position at Sterling Vance that I hadn't even considered whether it was still the right place for me. Did I really want to stay in an environment where my reputation had been so severely damaged, working for people who had been so quick to believe the absolute worst about me? That night, I wrote out a new plan. This one wasn't focused on revenge or even on restoration. It was focused on reinvention. I would fight to clear my name at Sterling Vance, not to keep my job, but to make sure the official record was set straight. In the meantime, I would quietly start exploring other opportunities, places where I could start fresh, leveraging my accomplishments without the stain of false rumors. The turning point for me was realizing that the most powerful response to my family's betrayal wasn't to sink to their level, but to rise so far above it they couldn't touch me. Success, real success, built on my own merits, would be the ultimate rebuttal to their belief that I was unstable or undeserving. For the first time since I'd read my father's email, I slept through the entire night. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was crystal clear. I was going to rebuild my career and my life, not out of spite, but out of respect for myself and for the work I had put in. The best revenge wouldn't be destroying my family. It would be creating a life so successful and fulfilling that their betrayal would become nothing more than a footnote in my story, rather than its defining chapter. Armed with my new perspective and a binder full of documentation, I scheduled a formal meeting with the Human Resources Department at Sterling Vance. I specifically requested that both Susan and a representative from their legal department be present. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about establishing a formal record of how the company had mishandled unsubstantiated claims against an employee. I walked into that meeting dressed impeccably in a navy blue suit that screamed confidence and professionalism. I brought multiple copies of my performance reviews from the past 5 years, letters of commendation from major clients, and a detailed, dated timeline of events since Leo had first mentioned the promotion. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began, my voice steady, despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I understand the company has been placed in a difficult position, but I believe there has been a serious lapse in proper procedure regarding the claims made about my mental health." I then methodically presented the evidence, dismantling every single one of my father's lies. My college transcripts showed no unexplained absences or drops in performance that would suggest a breakdown. Letters from professors and previous employers all attested to my consistent professionalism and emotional stability. I even included a letter from my primary care physician stating that I had never been referred for or received psychiatric treatment. Additionally, I continued, "I have consulted with an employment attorney. They have indicated that acting on unverified, third-party claims, especially when those claims directly contradict 5 years of documented exemplary performance, could potentially constitute workplace discrimination." Susan and the legal representative, a serious-looking woman named Janet, exchanged concerned glances. "We appreciate your thoroughness, Ava," Susan said carefully. "The company certainly wants to handle this issue correctly." "I understand that," I replied, "which is why I am not pursuing legal action at this time. I simply want my professional reputation restored and the record officially corrected." After a 2-hour discussion, we came to an agreement. The company would conduct a formal internal investigation into the situation, with the explicit goal of documenting that the claims against me were unsubstantiated. I would remain on paid leave during the investigation, but with a clear path to return once my name was cleared. As I was leaving, Janet, the lawyer, pulled me aside. "Off the record," she said quietly, "you should know that the interview with your sister did not go well. She was completely unprepared for basic questions about marketing strategy and client management." I thanked her for the information, feeling a small but satisfying measure of vindication. Chloe's lack of qualifications was becoming apparent to others, not just me. While the investigation was underway, I took Professor Davis's advice and started seriously exploring other opportunities. I polished my resume and portfolio, making sure to emphasize quantifiable achievements and glowing client testimonials. I began reaching out to my professional network, carefully framing my current situation as me exploring new challenges rather than fleeing a toxic workplace. Through a former client who had moved to a competing agency, Apex Innovations, I managed to secure an interview with their executive team. The firm had just landed several major accounts and was looking to expand its leadership. The position they were hiring for would be a significant step up from what I had at Sterling Vance, with more responsibility and much more creative control. During the interview, the question I had been dreading inevitably came up. "I notice you're currently on leave from Sterling Vance," said Isabella Rossi, one of the founding partners. "May I ask why?" I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. I knew honesty was crucial, but I was also aware that the full, crazy story might raise red flags. "I believe in transparency," I began, taking a deep breath. "My father, without my knowledge, contacted my employer with false claims about my mental health in an attempt to help my sister secure a position at the company. The company placed me on leave while they investigate these claims, which are in the process of being proven as unsubstantiated." There was a brief silence around the table. "That is an unusual situation," Isabella finally said. "How have you handled it professionally?" "I've worked through the proper channels with HR and legal to clear my name, maintaining professionalism throughout the process," I answered. "I've also used this time to reflect on what I truly want in my career and the type of organization I want to be a part of. And that reflection is what led me here, to you." What followed was an incredibly candid discussion about professional ethics, family dynamics, and resilience. Instead of being put off by my situation, the executives at Apex seemed impressed by how I was handling it. By the end of the interview, we were brainstorming specific ideas for their newest client campaigns. 3 days later, I got a call from Isabella. She offered me the position of Executive Creative Director, with a salary 30% higher than what the VP role at Sterling Vance would have paid, plus a substantial signing bonus and complete creative control over all new client acquisitions. "We were impressed, not just by your portfolio, but by your integrity in handling a very difficult situation," Isabella explained. "That is the kind of leadership we value here." I negotiated one additional term, that a public announcement of my new role be distributed through all major industry channels. It was critically important to me that my professional reputation be visibly and publicly restored. With my new position secured, I returned to Sterling Vance for one final meeting. The investigation had concluded, finding zero evidence to support any of my father's claims. Leo Vance looked genuinely remorseful. "I owe you an apology, Ava," he said as we sat in his office. "I should have come to you directly about your father's email instead of involving HR immediately. Your work has always been exemplary, and I allowed an outside influence to cloud my judgment." "I appreciate that," I said, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. This place had been my professional home for 5 years, and part of me was grieving that loss, even as I looked forward to my new opportunity. "We would like to offer you the Vice President of Strategy position," Leo continued, "with an additional compensation package to recognize the distress this situation has caused." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. "Thank you, Leo, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. I'll be starting as Executive Creative Director at Apex Innovations next month." The shock on his face was plain to see. Apex Innovations was a direct and formidable competitor, and my departure, along with my client relationships and institutional knowledge, would be a significant loss for Sterling Vance. "I see," he said carefully. "That's quite an advancement." Congratulations. As I got up to leave, he asked hesitantly, "What about your sister?" "She's been coming in for training sessions with the team." "That's between Chloe and the company," I replied coolly. "But I would suggest you carefully verify her credentials and capabilities. In my experience, she struggles with consistent performance and accountability. My very last act at Sterling Vance was to send an email to Jenna and the few other colleagues who had supported me, thanking them for their friendship and inviting them to stay in touch. I didn't mention my new job, knowing that the industry news would spread it for me soon enough. As I walked out of that building for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The professional part of my comeback was complete. I had cleared my name, secured a better position, and I had done it all without compromising my integrity. Now, all that was left was to face the personal fallout. My family. News of my new position at Apex Innovations spread like wildfire through the industry channels. The press release from Apex was brilliant, highlighting my experience and achievements and positioning my hire as a major strategic acquisition for the agency. Several marketing blogs picked up the story, with a particular focus on my rapid rise to an executive role at one of the city's most innovative firms. The first contact from my family came from my mother. It was a simple text message that read, "Saw the news about your new job. Call when you can. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a cold, simple expectation that I would reach out as if nothing had happened." I didn't respond. 3 days later, my father called. I let it go straight to voicemail. "Ava, it's your father. We need to talk about this new job of yours. Sounds like things worked out even better than we expected. See? Sometimes a little push is what you need. Give us a call. Sunday dinner is still on." His audacity was absolutely breathtaking. He was actually trying to take credit for my success, framing his heinous betrayal as some kind of tough love strategy that had ultimately benefited me. It just confirmed everything Dr. Reed and I had discussed about my family's completely distorted and toxic dynamics. I continued my therapy sessions, which were now focused on helping me establish healthy boundaries with my family. Dr. Reed was instrumental in helping me work through the tangled emotions of grieving the relationship I thought I had, while also accepting the harsh reality of the one that actually existed. "You don't owe them forgiveness or reconciliation," she reminded me. "Healthy boundaries might mean limited contact, or it might even mean no contact for a period of time." Chloe was the next to reach out. Her text was a bizarre mix of congratulations and self-pity. "Congrats on the fancy new job. Must be nice to always land on your feet. Things aren't going so great for me at Sterling and Vance. They keep saying my work isn't up to standard. Could use some advice if you're not too busy being successful." I showed the message to Dr. Reed in our next session. "What do you make of this?" she asked. "It's classic Chloe," I replied. A superficial nod to my achievement, immediately followed by making it all about her problems. She's not taking any responsibility for her performance issues, and she's still expecting me to swoop in and fix it for her. "And how does that make you feel?" Dr. Reed asked. I thought about it carefully. Sad, mostly. Sad that she can't see how completely inappropriate it is to ask me for help after she participated in what happened. Sad that she's still stuck in this same pathetic pattern. But also free. I don't feel responsible for fixing this for her anymore. That realization was incredibly powerful. For my entire life, I had felt this unspoken obligation to smooth Chloe's path, to help her succeed, to shield her from the consequences of her own actions. That burden was no longer mine to carry. Instead of responding to Chloe, I poured all my energy into building my new life. I threw myself into my role at Apex Innovations, quickly establishing myself as a creative and effective leader. I developed genuine friendships with colleagues who appreciated my contributions without all the baggage of my family drama. I also started to reconnect with some extended family members who had only heard my parents' twisted version of events. My Aunt Carol, my father's sister, invited me to lunch one weekend. "I've been hearing some concerning things from your parents," she said carefully. "They mentioned you were having some emotional difficulties." I took a deep breath and I told her the unvarnished truth. I showed her the press release about my new position and explained what my parents had actually done. Aunt Carol was horrified. "That is not the story they've been telling everyone," she said, her eyes wide. "They said you had some kind of breakdown after being passed over for a promotion and that they were very worried about you." "They created the situation they're describing," I explained. "They sabotaged my promotion, and then they painted my justified anger as a mental health crisis." Over the following weeks, I had similar, honest conversations with other family members. My goal wasn't to turn them against my parents, but simply to ensure my side of the story was heard. Many were shocked by what my parents had done, although a few still tried to excuse their behavior as misguided attempts to help Chloe. Meanwhile, I heard through the industry grapevine that Chloe was struggling significantly at Sterling Vance. Apparently, after learning the full extent of my father's deception, Leo had put her supervisors on high alert. She had been placed on a performance improvement plan and was in serious danger of being let go. My mother started leaving increasingly desperate voicemails, trying different angles to reestablish contact. "Ava, honey, we miss you at Sunday dinners. Your sister's having such a hard time at work. She could really use your guidance. Your father didn't mean to hurt you. He was just trying to help Chloe." I maintained my distance, focusing instead on building a support network that was healthy and reciprocal. I joined a book club, started taking weekend pottery classes, and began volunteering at a marketing mentorship program for underprivileged youth. For maybe the first time in my adult life, I was developing an identity that was completely separate from my family's toxic dynamics. 3 months into my new job, I was invited to be a keynote speaker at a major industry conference, where I knew many of my former colleagues would be present. My presentation on innovative marketing strategies was a huge hit. Afterwards, several Sterling Vance employees, including Jenna, came up to me. "You look amazing," Jenna said, giving me a warm hug. "Apex is so lucky to have you." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely happy to see her. "How are things back at Sterling Vance?" "Different. Without you," she admitted. "Leo really regrets how everything went down. And your sister, well, it's okay, you can tell me." "She was let go last week," Jenna said. "She just couldn't handle the client load or the deadlines. And people kept comparing her work to yours, which didn't help." I felt a complex storm of emotions hearing this. A part of me, the part that was still so deeply hurt by her betrayal, felt a sense of vindication. But another part just felt sad. Sad that Chloe had been put in a position she was destined to fail in, largely due to our parents' misguided and selfish efforts. Later that evening, I spotted Leo across the hotel bar at the conference reception. After a moment's hesitation, I walked over to him. "Ava," he said, with genuine pleasure in his voice, "your presentation today was outstanding." "Thank you, Leo," I replied. "How have you been?" "Honestly, dealing with the fallout from what happened with you. It was a wake-up call for how we handle personnel issues. We've instituted entirely new protocols for verifying any third-party claims about employees." "That's good to hear," I said, and I was surprised to realize that I no longer felt any anger toward him. He had been manipulated by my father, And while his initial response was flawed, he had ultimately recognized his mistake and learned from it. "I heard about Chloe," I added. He looked uncomfortable. "Yes, that was unfortunate. She was clearly not ready for that level of responsibility. I should have recognized that from the beginning." We parted on cordial terms, and I returned to the conference feeling a sense of closure about my time at Sterling Vance. My professional reputation was more than restored. I was building something new and exciting at Apex. In my next session with Dr. Reed, I shared all these developments. "You've made remarkable progress," she observed. "You've established healthy boundaries. You've rebuilt your career. And you've developed a stronger sense of self completely outside of your family relationships. The question now is, what kind of relationship, if any, do you want with your parents and sister moving forward?" It was a question I'd been thinking about for weeks. The hurt was still there. The breach of trust was profound. But they were still my family, for better or worse. "I'm not ready for regular contact," I admitted. "But I think eventually I might be open to a relationship with very clear boundaries and expectations, one where I am not responsible for fixing everything for Chloe, and one where my parents have to respect me as an adult with my own life." "That sounds like a very healthy approach," Dr. Reed said. "And remember, forgiveness, if you ever choose it, is for your benefit, not theirs." A year later, I was on stage accepting the Innovator of the Year award at the annual Marketing Industry Gala. In the audience were two of my former colleagues from Sterling Vance, including Leo, who gave me a respectful nod. The industry was small, and word of my success at Apex had spread. I'd been promoted to Chief Creative Officer just 6 months after joining the firm, becoming the youngest person to ever hold that position in the company's history. After the ceremony, I checked my phone and found a text from my mother. "Saw online about your award. Congratulations. Your father and I are proud of you." It was the first contact from them I had responded to in months. "Thank you," I wrote back, keeping it simple. The truth was, my parents had reached out multiple times over the past year, especially after Chloe lost her job at Sterling Vance. She had remained unemployed for several months before finally finding a position at a much smaller firm, one that was better suited to her actual experience level. Without the immense pressure of trying to fill my shoes, she was apparently doing okay there. My parents' financial situation had also changed dramatically. My father's company had downsized, and at 58, he found himself suddenly out of a job. After decades of living well beyond their means, they had significant debt and very few savings. Pride had kept them from reaching out for a while, but eventually, financial necessity won out. The voicemail from my father had been difficult to listen to. His voice, usually so confident and booming, sounded strained and old. "Ava, I know we've had our differences, but your mother and I are in a difficult position right now. I've lost my job and the mortgage. Well, we could use some advice. You were always so good with finances. Please call when you can." I didn't call back right away. Instead, I discussed it with Dr. Reed in one of our now monthly check-in sessions. "How does their request make you feel?" she asked. "Conflicted," I admitted. "Part of me wants to help because they're still my parents. Another part sees the supreme irony in them coming to me for help after everything they did. And honestly, a small, petty part of me feels vindicated that they now need me instead of the other way around." "Those are all natural reactions," she assured me. "The question is, what response aligns with your values and your boundaries now?" After careful thought, I did call them back. I did not offer them any money, which would have just reinforced the same unhealthy dynamics. But I did provide practical advice about budgeting, about how to job search at my father's age, and about the possibility of downsizing their home. The conversation was awkward but civil, with a thick layer of tension that neither of us addressed directly. My mother called the following week. "Your father is too proud to say it, but your advice was helpful. He has an interview next week with a smaller insurance firm. It would be a step down, but it's something." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied, maintaining the polite but distant tone that now defined our interactions. "Ava," she continued, her voice hesitant, "we miss you. What happened last year? Your father just thought he was doing what was best for everyone. By lying about my mental health? By trying to give Chloe a position she wasn't qualified for? He made a mistake," she conceded, which was perhaps the closest either of my parents had ever come to a real apology. "We both did. We never thought it would affect you so much. You've always been so strong, so capable of handling anything." "That doesn't make it okay to sabotage me," I pointed out. "And it doesn't help Chloe in the long run. She needs to find her own path, not be handed mine." There was a long pause before my mother spoke again. "I understand that now. Diana is doing better in her new job. It's more her speed, less pressure, and she's taking some classes to improve her skills." It was a small step, but it was a step toward acknowledging the reality of Chloe's capabilities rather than the inflated version they had always desperately maintained. Over the following months, a new, tentative pattern emerged. I occasionally joined them for Sunday dinners, though not every week like before. The conversations remained somewhat on the surface, focused on safe topics. My father did find a new job, less prestigious and lower paying than his old one. The experience seemed to have humbled him, though I'd still see glimpses of his old controlling nature surface from time to time. Chloe and I even managed to establish a cautious, sisterly relationship. Without our parents actively pitting us against each other, we found we could interact like two adults with separate lives, rather than as competitors. She seemed genuinely interested in my career advice, now that it came without the crushing pressure of constant comparison. My professional life, meanwhile, flourished at Apex Innovations. I built a team that shared my values of creativity, integrity, and mutual support. I made a point to mentor younger staff members, especially women, helping them navigate the often tricky dynamics of the marketing world. My own experience had made me hyper-aware of office politics and the absolute importance of establishing clear boundaries. As I reflected on the past couple of years, I realized how profoundly the experience had changed me. The betrayal had been agonizing, a pain so deep I didn't think I would survive it. But it had forced me to recognize toxic patterns I might have otherwise tolerated for the rest of my life. It had pushed me to establish healthier boundaries, to value myself independently of my family's approval, and to build a life entirely on my own terms. I had learned that success wasn't just about career achievements or financial rewards. It was about integrity, self-respect, and surrounding myself with people who valued me authentically. I discovered that sometimes the most painful experiences can lead to the most significant growth, and that resilience doesn't come from avoiding hurt, but from learning how to move through it with grace and purpose. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth was not, and had never been, dependent on my family's recognition or approval. It was inherent, it was unchangeable, and it was defined by me, and me alone. As I looked out at the city from my office window, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so much of my life. The journey had been hell, but I had emerged from the fire stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself than ever before. I wonder if you've ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to a positive change in your life. How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming challenges and finding your own path. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the most painful moments can become the foundation for your greatest strength and happiness.